It's easy to forget that because of its short life, the internet has actually changed many times over the last 30 years or so. It started in the 70s as a military project, morphed in the 1980s to an academic network, co-opted by commercial companies in the 90s, and then invaded by all of us via social media in the noughties. But I think it's going to change again. And I think things like the darknet markets, creative, secure, difficult to censor, I think that's the future. And the reason it's the future is because we're all worried about our privacy. Surveys consistently show concerns about privacy. The more time we spend online, the more we worry about them, and those surveys show our worries are growing. We're worried about what happens to our data. We're worried about who might be watching us. Since the revelations from Edward Snowden, there's been a huge increase in the number of people using various privacy-enhancing tools. There are now between 2 and 3 million daily users of the Tor browser, the majority of use is perfectly legitimate, sometimes even mundane.
Ed, one response to this whole debate is this. It's why should we care about all this surveillance, honestly? I mean, look, if you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to worry about. What's wrong with that point of view?
Well, so the first thing is you're giving up your rights. You're saying, hey, I don't think I'm going to need them, so I'm just going to trust that, let's get rid of them. It doesn't really matter. These guys are going to do the right thing. Your rights matter because you never know when you're going to need them. Beyond that, it's a part of our cultural identity, not just in America, but in Western societies and in democratic societies around the world. People should be able to pick up the phone and to call their family. People should be able to send a text message to their loved ones. People should be able to buy a book online. They should be able to travel by train. They should be able to buy an airline ticket without wondering about how these events are going to look to an agent of the government, possibly not even your government, years in the future. How they're going to be misinterpreted and what they're going to think your intentions are. We have a right to privacy.
Privacy matters because we all need a margin of discretion around our lives so that we can exercise some control over them. The fact of the matter is that we've already long ago given up much of our privacy as soon as we started to email and use mobile telephones. But if you thought about what it would be like if your neighbours knew details of your bank account or your medical record or could listen into your quarrels with your spouse, you would be very disconcerted because you would feel that you were losing control over areas of your life that just belong to you. That's why privacy really matters. And the great worry that we have in the digital age is that we've already given so much of it up, both to private agencies and to public ones.
It's more about the things that make you vulnerable. And so when we think about privacy and private information, it's really a question of vulnerability. And so from an adult perspective, we're really concerned about physical vulnerabilities and increasingly about psychological vulnerabilities. And for a lot of young people, it's about social vulnerabilities. So, how do I make certain that I don't get teased, harassed, bullied because of the things that I make available out there? How do I make certain that what I put out there makes me seem cool and not lame?
Google knows what you're interested in right now. Do they know who you are? Do they have a profile of you? Not in any real sense. But they're watching as you click. But because we trust Google to watch for the right reason, which is to give us better results, we're okay with this.
There is a very common sentiment that arises in this debate, even among people who are uncomfortable with mass surveillance, which says that there's no real harm that comes from this large-scale invasion because only people who are engaged in bad acts have a reason to want to hide and to care about their privacy. This worldview is implicitly grounded in the proposition that there are two kinds of people in the world, good people and bad people. Bad people are those who plot terrorist attacks or who engage in violent criminality and therefore have reasons to want to hide what they're doing, have reasons to care about their privacy. But by contrast, good people are people who go to work, come home, raise their children, watch television. They use the internet not to plot bombing attacks, but to read the news or exchange recipes or to plan their kids' Little League games. And those people are doing nothing wrong and therefore have nothing to hide and no reason to fear the government monitoring them. The people who are actually saying that are engaged in a very extreme act of self-deprecation. What they're really saying is, I have agreed to make myself such a harmless and unthreatening and uninteresting person that I actually don't fear having the government know what it is that I'm doing. This mindset has found what I think is its purest expression in a 2009 interview with the longtime CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, who, when asked about all the different ways his company is causing invasions of privacy for hundreds of millions of people around the world, said this. He said, if you're doing something that you don't want other people to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. Now, there's all kinds of things to say about that mentality.
The slides are here. This is a slide of the PRISM program. And maybe you could tell the audience what that was revealed.
The best way to understand PRISM, because there's been a little bit of controversy, is to first talk about what PRISM is. Much of the debate in the US has been about metadata. They've said it's just metadata. It's just metadata. PRISM is about content. It's a program through which the government could compel corporate America. It could sort of deputize corporate America to do its dirty work for the NSA. The biggest thing that an internet company in America can do today, right now, without consulting with lawyers to protect the rights of users worldwide, is to enable SSL or TLS, sort of encryption, web encryption on every page that you visit. The reason this matters is today, if you go to look at a copy of 1984 on Amazon.com, the NSA can see a record of that. The Russian intelligence service can see a record of that. The Chinese service can see a record of that. The French service, the German service, the services of Andorra, they can all see it because it's unencrypted. The world's library is Amazon.com. But not only do they not support encryption by default, you cannot choose to use encryption when browsing through books. This is something that we need to change, not just for Amazon. I don't mean to single them out, but they're a great example. All companies need to move to an encrypted browsing habit by default for all users who haven't taken any action or picked any special methods on their own. That'll increase the privacy and the rights that people enjoy worldwide.
I mean, you talk to young people, for example, who've got their own personal blog sites or their presence on YouTube or Facebook, and that they may come to regret doing some of the things they did on video, on the internet, or saying the things that they did, especially when they start applying for jobs and employers begin to look back through the digital record of these people, the trace that they've left in the public domain. But quite unaware, every single day that we do something digital, we are potentially leaving a trace out there, and that if somebody wanted to find out where we were shopping, what we were doing, who we were communicating with, why we were doing it, what websites we were logging on to, they could do it. It's a very, very exposed set of media, these electronic communication devices that we now use.
I think, as we go online, the deal is relatively straightforward. So when you go on Amazon and you click, and as you click through from product to product to product, you start to see the recommendations appear, either based on your past history or more typically your session. As you start looking for cameras, you start to see people who clicked, who looked at this also looked at that. People who bought this, people who clicked at this bought that. In the course of your clicking, the service becomes more useful to you. The implicit, and for many people the explicit trade-off is that in exchange for watching over your shoulder as you shop, we will help you shop better.
They're not going to stop what they put up there, because the trick with online materials is everything is persistent by its nature, right? That's one of the powers of the internet. And we think of it really as a useful affordance, right? Because if something is persistent, that means you can get access to it at a different time, right? That's the opportunity for asynchronicity. but it's also how this material is available 10, 15, 20 years later. And right now we're in that moment of transition, that point of absolute confusion, the uncertainty of, what does it mean that you have everything up there? Down the road, it just becomes the way things are.
When I was 15, I found this website called Futaba Channel, and it was a Japanese forum and image board. And that format of forum at that time was not well known outside of Japan. And so what I did is I took it, I translated it into English, and I stuck it up for my friends to use. And now, 6.5 years later, over 7 million people are using it, contributing over 700,000 posts per month, or per day rather. And we've gone from 1 board to 48 boards. This is what it looks like. So what's unique about the site is that it's anonymous and it has no memory. There's no archive. There are no barriers. There's no registration. These things that we're used to with forums don't exist on 4chan. And that's led to this discussion that's completely raw, completely unfiltered. And what the site's known for, because it has this environment, is it's fostered the creation of a lot of internet phenomena, viral videos and whatnot, known as memes.
Now, the Tor browser was originally a US naval intelligence project. It then became open source, and it allows anybody to browse the net without giving away their location. And it does this by encrypting your IP address and then routing it via several other computers around the world that use the same software. You can use it on the normal internet, but it's also your key to the dark net. And because of this fiendishly clever encryption system, the 20 or 30, we don't know exactly, 1,000 sites that operate there are incredibly difficult to shut down. It is a censorship-free world visited by anonymous users.
As I said, it's raw, it's unfiltered, and sites like it are kind of going the way of the dinosaur right now. They're endangered because we're moving towards social networking, we're moving towards persistent identity, we're moving towards a lack of privacy, really. We're sacrificing a lot of that, and I think in doing so, moving towards those things, we're losing something valuable.
Now, there's a reason why privacy is so craved universally and instinctively. It isn't just a reflexive movement like breathing air or drinking water. The reason is that when we're in a state where we can be monitored, where we can be watched, our behavior changes dramatically. The range of behavioral options that we consider when we think we're being watched severely reduce. This is just a fact of human nature that has been recognized in social science and in literature and in religion and in virtually every field of discipline. There are dozens of psychological studies that prove that when somebody knows that they might be watched, the behavior they engage in is vastly more conformist and compliant. Human shame is a very powerful motivator, as is the desire to avoid it. Every single time somebody has said to me, I don't really worry about invasions of privacy because I don't have anything to hide, I always say the same thing to them. I get out a pen, I write down my email address, I say, here's my email address. What I want you to do when you get home is email me the passwords to all of your email accounts. Not just the nice, respectable work one in your name, but all of them. Because I want to be able to just troll through what it is you're doing online, read what I want to read, and publish whatever I find interesting. After all, if you're not a bad person, if you're doing nothing wrong, you should have nothing to hide. Not a single person has taken me up on that offer. I check that email account religiously all the time. It's a very desolate place. And there's a reason for that, which is that we as human beings, even those of us who in words disclaim the importance of our own privacy, instinctively understand the profound importance of it.
When most people think of anonymity, they usually think of the internet. the trolls who dwell in the comment sections on articles or on Reddit.
Trolling is about disruption, the deliberate attempt to frustrate, confuse, or infuriate a chosen target. It can run the gamut from redirecting someone to an absurd image or video clip, for example, Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up, all the way to going after the friends and family of murdered teenagers, and everything in between.
So this issue on anonymity is, I mean, you made the case there, but anonymity basically allows people to say anything, all the rules gone. You've had to wrestle with issues like child pornography, and I'm just curious whether you sometimes lie awake in the night worrying that you've opened Pandora's box.
It's yes and no. I mean, for as much good that kind of comes out of this environment, there is plenty of bad. There are plenty of downsides. But I think that the greater good is that is being served here by just allowing people. There are very few places now where you can go and not have an identity, to be completely anonymous and say whatever you'd like. And saying whatever you like, I think, is powerful. Doing whatever you like is now crossing a line. But I think it's important to have these places where people, I mean, I get emails, people say thank you for giving me this place, this outlet where I can come after work and be myself.
But words, saying things, you know, can be constructive. It can be really damaging. And if you cut the link between what is said and any attribution back to you, I mean, surely there are huge risks with that.
There really is a sense of that protection of anonymity that allows people to give rise to these sort of aggressive speech acts. But on places like Facebook, where every identity is tied to a real name, there's still a lot of aggressive speech acts. So I don't think it's as much about anonymity as it is about the distancing fact of the computer screen in front of you.
Does our right to freedom of speech also guarantee our right to be anonymous? Anonymity remains essential today. It offers protection to those who are most at risk of experiencing retaliation for their actions or beliefs, such as those who support potentially controversial organizations. As Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens put it, anonymity is a shield from the tyranny of the majority.
So solutions on anonymity have to recognize that the people we're trying to protect by forcing people to reveal their true names online are often the people that are speaking anonymously online. Think of the kid who is gay and is in a high school where that revelation would lead to physical abuse for him. You can take the example of a victim of domestic violence. You can take the example of a dissident fighting against a foreign government where their identity would cause the government to simply find them and kill them.
Today, in an effort to make the internet more transparent, some want to require internet commenters to reveal their names online. And it's not just the internet. Some are pushing for legislation that would force causes and advocacy groups to reveal the identities of anonymous supporters. While this may sound like a good idea on the surface, anonymity is crucial for a meaningful right to free speech. When we think about anonymity, we often think about its negative uses, but fail to consider the LGBTQ student seeking confidential advice about coming out to their parents, the young pregnant woman seeking reproductive health, the depressed college student seeking mental health support from an online community, or someone with a controversial political opinion who supports a cause.
So the internet's about to get more interesting, more exciting, more innovative, more terrible, more destructive. That's good news if you care about liberty. It's good news if you care about freedom. It's good news if you care about democracy. It's also good news if you want to browse for illegal pornography and if you want to buy and sell drugs with impunity. It's neither entirely dark nor entirely light. It's not one side or the other that's going to win out, but both.